This is Recipe for Sleep, a podcast where we dust off very old cookbooks and let them lull us into dreamland. We'd love for you to join our community at banksalt.com, where I share my own recipes and stories. I'm Erin Brindley, a chef and storyteller. Tonight, we're going to slide right back into books and my food. Each recipe is coupled with a literary quote, and there are 365 of them, one for each day of the year. I chose this cookbook for the holiday season because cuddling up with a good book by a fire is my favorite part of these long nights. Last week, we read the introduction and the recipes for January and February, so we'll pick it right back up in March. Luckily, there is no plot to follow here, so if you missed last week's episode, you'll find it easy enough to jump right in. I find the recipe part to be the most relaxing anyway, and tonight we'll get you right into it, just as soon as we've tucked you in. I offer the same visualization exercise every week. I like the imagery of putting my worries away in their separate cupboards, tidying up my busy brain like a kitchen after a meal. If you'd like me to mix it up a bit with other imagery, let me know at the Recipe for Sleep Instagram. For tonight, turn the lights out. Put away anything you were doing and snuggle deep into your sweet covers. Imagine the kitchen of your mind. There are 2 cupboards there. Yesterday's cupboard, for all the things that have already happened that your mind wants to chew on. And tomorrow's cupboard for all the things you're going to do or what's going to happen later. It's time to put everything away in those cupboards. Imagine closing each one. You made it to this cozy, quiet time of day where there's nothing to do but listen to me read you old cookbooks until you drift off to sleep. We'll begin where we left off on March 1st with a literary quote and a recipe. March 1. At private houses, what does one get now? Blanc de poulet, flavorless trash. Bulwer, Parisians. Potage à la reine, which is one form of the despised blanc de poulet, is sufficiently delicious for any festival occasion. Remove the fat from a quart of chicken broth. Season with salt, pepper, and a little onion, and put on to boil. Soak in a little half milk, half a small loaf of breadcrumbs, and mix with them the yolks of 3 hard-boiled eggs, mashed smooth. Chop the white meat of a boiled chicken to a powder and stir into the breadcrumbs and eggs. Stir in slowly 1 pint of hot cream and mix with the hot chicken broth. Boil 5 minutes. If too thick, add more cream. If not thick enough, more crumbs. The white meat of cold roast chicken may be used. March 2nd. Turbot with capers is the thing. The brisk little capers relieve the dullness of the turbot. The melted butter is rich, bland, and calm. Thackeray, Memorials of Gourmandizing. This fish is fortunate in being the better for keeping a day or so, when so many kinds of fish need absolute freshness to make them palatable. Soak the turbot in salted water for at least half hour before cooking. Put it into a pan of boiling water in which are the juice of 2 lemons and 2 tablespoonfuls salt. Put the black side of the fish down when the water begins to boil. Skim and set back where it will only simmer for half an hour. At the end of that time, drain it carefully. Place on a platter, covered with a napkin. Garnish with parsley, lemon, and hard-boiled eggs, and serve with white sauce, to which capers have been added. A 6-pound turbot is a good size. March 3rd. Here's a pigeon so finely roasted it cries, "Come eat me." Swift. Polite conversation. It is only a very tender pigeon, which can be confident of its roasted charms. But the right bird is delicious, so cooked. Draw, wash, and wipe. Pepper and salt the insides. Tie into shape or fasten with skewers. Wrap the bird with slices of fat bacon or salt pork and put in the pan with half a cup of hot water to which a teaspoonful of butter has been added. Cook for 15 minutes before removing the bacon, then rub with lemon juice and butter and brown. Put the pigeons where they will keep hot while you stir into the gravy a tablespoonful of butter rubbed into one of browned flour. Boil up once. March 4th. Some cheeses are made of skimmed milk and some of new milk, and it's no matter what you call 'em. You may tell which is which by the look and the smell. George Eliot. Adam Bede. To make a fresh pot cheese, place in rather a shallow pan milk that has turned a little sour. Put it over a saucepan of boiling water and heat almost to the boiling point. After about 6 minutes, turn the milk over by spoonfuls to heat it all equally. When heated through, turn into a colander to drain. When free of whey, add salt to taste and butter. A few spoonfuls of cream improves it. March 5th. Thy child as surely grasps an orange as he fails to grasp the sun. Robert Browning, Farishta's Fancies. Pare sweet seedless oranges. Take off the inner tough white covering and divide into sections. Add to the beaten whites of 2 eggs, 2 tablespoons of cold water. Dip the sections of orange in it and then roll each one in granulated sugar. Put on a platter the sections, not touching. Set in a warm oven 3 or 4 minutes, then set away to cool. March 6th. Presently, we were aware of an odor gradually coming towards us. Something musky, fiery, savory, mysterious. A hot, drowsy smell that lulls the senses and yet inflames them. The truffles were coming. Thackeray, Memorials of Gourmandizing. If I remember rightly, Thackeray was in France when he wrote of the truffles. Certainly in no other country do they correspond to his description. The way to realize a faint reminiscence of the reality is to buy a can of French pâté de foie gras of the best make procurable. Spread the contents on thin strips of toasted bread and eat them as gaily as the occasion warrants. Do not insult the memory Thackeray has enshrined by pretending that the canned truffle of the grocery is the delicacy to which he refers. March 7th. For Miss Barker had ordered all sorts of good things for supper. Scalloped oysters, potted lobsters, jelly, a dish called Little Cupids. Gaskell, Cranford. Scalloped oysters are somewhat uncertain unless a good rule is carefully followed. This one has always produced admirable results. Drain the oysters and do not use the liquor. Cover the bottom of a buttered dish with a layer of oysters. Place on this a layer of fine breadcrumbs, not cracker crumbs, over which dabs of butter and plenty of salt and pepper have been strewn. Then another layer of oysters until the dish is full, with a layer of crumbs on top. Moisten with a cup of milk, slightly thickened. Bake half an hour. March 8th. "Well, eat and be thankful," said the little sister, who was as gay as a little sister could be, and who had prepared a beautiful bread sauce for the fowl. Thackeray, The Adventures of Philip. Tie a chicken that has been cleaned but not stuffed into a piece of cheesecloth. Plunge it into a kettle of boiling water to which a tablespoonful of vinegar has been added. Let it simmer until tender. 20 minutes to the pound ought to be enough. Unwrap and serve with bread sauce. Rule for sauce. Pour a quart of hot milk, in which an onion has been boiled tender, over 2 cupfuls of stale white bread, grated. Let it stand an hour. Then turn the mixture into a saucepan. Add butter the size of an egg, mixed with 2 tablespoonfuls of flour. Boil for 5 minutes. Season with salt and pepper. March 9th. It was Mrs. Gill, as I have seen her, making custards in the heat of summer, in the cool dairy with rose trees and nasturtiums about the latticed window, preparing a cold collation for the rectors, preserves and dulcet creams. Charlotte Bronte, Shirley. Dulcet creams, warranted to please the most fastidious of rectors, are made with 2 dozen almonds, blanched and pounded, and boiled in a little milk, the yolks of 5 eggs well beaten, a wineglass of the best brandy, a teacupful of sugar, and a quart of cream. Set over the fire and bring to the boiling point, stirring until it thickens. Pour into glass cups and serve cold. March 10th. On the plain household bread his eye did not dwell, but he surveyed with favor some currant tea cakes, and condescended to make choice of one. Charlotte Bronte, Shirley. Currant jumbles still give delight to children, and to grown-up children as well, as an accompaniment to a cup of afternoon tea. Beat a cupful of butter to a cream, then beat in 2 cupfuls of sugar, and add 2 well-beaten eggs, and finally 3 scant cupfuls of flour, in which have been stirred 2 heaping teaspoonfuls of baking powder, and half a teaspoonful of salt. The dough should be stiff enough to roll thin. Sprinkle the tops of the jumbles with currants and peanuts chopped fine, and a little granulated sugar. 10 minutes in the oven is generally enough to bake them. March 11th. Give cherries in time of year, or apricots, and say, they were sent you from the country. Ben Jonson. Frozen apricots can be given any time of year by using fruit that has been canned or preserved. Cut in very small pieces 1 can of apricots, add a quart of water, and 2 cups of sugar, and freeze. When partly frozen, add 2/3 of a cup of cream whipped to lightness. Stir into the apricot and finish freezing. If the apricots used are preserved, less sugar will be needed, but all frozen desserts need more sugar than unfrozen ones. March 12th. If you are hungry, can't you be content with the wholesome roots of the earth? Sheridan, The Duenna. Few people realize the excellent flavor of the celery root. Cut it into thin slices and boil for about 2 hours or until tender. Serve with a cream sauce. It will have a much stronger flavor than the stalk of the celery, and possesses even more valuable attributes as the calmer of irritated nerves. March 13th. The pie dishes were now drawn out of the ashes and broken, and the meat baked with all its juices was greedily devoured. It tastes like a rabbit. Charles Reade, it is never too late to mend. Add to 1 pound of lean, chopped beef, 1/4 of a pound of bacon. Season highly with salt and pepper, and if the flavor is liked, with 1 teaspoonful of minced onion. Stir into it a beaten egg and form into a long roll. Encase in a shell of buttered paper and place in a pan. Cover closely the whole with a thick paste of cornmeal. Bake 3/4 of an hour. Remove the paste and serve. If it does not taste like a rabbit, it will at least taste much better than an inferior cut of steak, which costs nearly twice as much. March 14th. Twice meat was forbidden and twice pudding allowed. Mrs. Humphrey Ward. Marcella. An excellent rule for custard pudding is this: beat until very light the yolks of 6 eggs and 7 tablespoonfuls of sugar. Pour slowly on them a quart of hot milk, in which is a small pinch of salt. Fill buttered custard cups with the mixture. Set in a pan of hot water and bake until set. Then draw to the door of the oven and quickly dot the surface of each custard with currant jelly, raspberry jam, or other favorite and convenient substitute. Cover with meringue made of the whites of 3 eggs and a tablespoonful and a half of powdered sugar. Brown gently. March 15th. Better a crust of black bread than a mountain of paper confections. Arthur Hugh Clough. The Bothy of Tabarna, Voilek. Old-time New England brown bread is almost as sweet and nutty as a confection. To make it, sift 2 cupfuls of rye flour, 2 cupfuls of Indian meal, 2 teaspoonfuls of salt and 1 of soda dissolved in a little hot water. Mix into a white bread sponge that is already light and add gradually 1/2 cup of molasses. Knead well and leave 6 or 7 hours. Then knead into loaves and let rise for 2 hours longer. Bake 3 hours in a slow oven. March 16th. Papa was great at lobster salads and taught me. I mixed it myself a fortnight ago, and as you see, it is as fresh and sweet as if I had just made it. George de Moria, Peter Ibbetson. A boiled salad dressing that does keep fresh and sweet for a fortnight is made by adding 3 tablespoonfuls of vinegar to the beaten yolks of 3 eggs, heating on a double boiler and stirring until stiff. On removing the fire, stir in 2 tablespoonfuls of butter, mixing thoroughly. Season when cold with salt, mustard, and cayenne, and thin with olive oil to the desired consistency. Keep in a cool place. March 17th. For the first course at the top, a pig and prune sauce. Goldsmith, She Stoops to Conquer. Prunes, to be eaten with meat, should not be sweetened. Soak a pound of carefully washed prunes in cold water overnight. Put them into a stew pan with a quart of fresh water and 2 lemons that have been cut into thin slices, from which the seeds have been removed. Let them simmer gently for 3 hours. Serve cold. They are to be eaten with pork, veal, or duck, in place of the sour applesauce usually served. March 18th. Shall we pay respect to this haunch, Mr. Quinn? Charles Reade, Peg Woofington. A haunch of mutton, cooked with care, gives a change from the leg and chops which are the usual winter resource. It should not be used till it has hung some time. Rub it well with vinegar several times the day before cooking it, when it should be covered with a thick paste of flour and water and cooked in a very slow oven for several hours. 3/4 of an hour before eating it, the paste should be removed and the mutton basted often. There will not be much gravy in the roasting pan, so a brown or stock gravy should be made to serve with it. This should give a juicy roast. Currant jelly should be passed with the roast mutton. March 19th. Dear Mrs. B, chops and tomato sauce. Yours, Pickwick. Charles Dickens, Pickwick Papers. Tomato sauce with more flavor than that usually served with chops is made by adding to 1 quart of canned tomatoes a chopped onion fried in a little butter and 2 cupfuls of strong brown soup, highly seasoned with salt and pepper. Cook for 3 hours on the side of the range. Strain through a puree sieve. Return to the stove and thicken with a tablespoonful of flour rubbed into an equal quantity of butter. March 20th. The meat of the meal folk made some 50 years ago. Browning. Fifine at the fair. This is one of Browning's abstruse utterances, which we might refer to the Browning Societies. In the meantime, we may assume that meat of the meal is plain flour, and may be used in making a flour soup, which is better than that name sounds. Brown a tablespoonful of flour in the same quantity of melted butter. Pour into it a pint of milk and bring to a boil. Season with salt, red pepper, and parsley. After taking it from the fire, stir through it the beaten yolk of an egg. A teaspoonful of onion juice may be added if liked. March 21st. Do you put cayenne in your cream tarts in India, sir? Thackeray, Vanity Fair. Cayenne cannot be recommended as a flavoring for cream tarts, but preserved ginger can be. Bake in round patty pans a plain pie crust dough till a light golden brown. When cold, pour into the pie crust shells a cream made by stirring into 1.5 cups of boiling milk, 2/3 of a cup of sugar, 2 eggs beaten lightly, whites and yolks together, and 2 tablespoonfuls of flour, made smooth with cold milk. A pinch of salt should be added when the cream has cooked for 15 minutes, and 2 tablespoonfuls of preserved or candied ginger, chopped fine. Put on each tart a small round of the pastry. March 22nd. Mrs. Bates, let me propose your venturing on one of these eggs. An egg boiled very soft is not unwholesome. Cyril understands boiling an egg better than anybody. You need not be afraid. They are very small, you see. One of our small eggs will not hurt you. Jane Austen, Emma. Even Mr. Woodhouse would have found eggs boiled in the following manner wholesome. Cyril herself could not have improved upon it. Cover the eggs with boiling water. Allow them to boil 1 minute, then move back to where the water remains at the boiling point but does not actually simmer. In 5 minutes, remove from the fire, when the whites and yolks will be cooked to a jelly-like consistency but not hardened. March 23rd. And Francis, lass, I bought some cresses in. Just wash them, toast the bacon, break some eggs. Jean Ingelow, Poems. Bacon may be very delicately prepared for an invalid or a well person by chilling in ice water before broiling over a brisk fire. When partly cooked, remove quickly from the fire. Plunge the pieces again in iced water. Shake the water off and return to the broiler. Serve very hot with cresses fresh from the brook, and you will have a dainty rural breakfast. March 24th. I eat my apples, relish what is ripe. Robert Browning, Farishta's Fancies. Into a tablespoonful of hot butter, Stir 2 tablespoonfuls of flour, and when it begins to thicken, pour in 2 cupfuls of scalded milk in which has been dissolved 1/4 teaspoonful of soda. Stir for 2 minutes and add the yolks of 4 eggs, beaten light. Then stir in 6 large pippins, pared and grated, and when they have been well mixed, the whites of the eggs, beaten stiff. Half fill buttered custard or popover cups. Set in a pan of hot water and bake in a quick oven until they puff up and are sufficiently brown. Open the oven door and let them dry for a couple of minutes. Brandy or lemon sauce should be served with them. March 25th. There were ruddy, brown-faced, broad-girthed Spanish onions, shining in the fatness of their growth like Spanish friars. Charles Dickens, Christmas Carol. Peel and parboil Spanish onions for a few minutes. Drain and let them stand till quite cold. Take out the center from each and stuff with a mixture of finely chopped cold meat, ham, chicken, or veal, and 1/3 as much fine breadcrumbs. Season with salt, paprika, and bits of butter. Set the onions close together in a dish with a little stock or gravy. Sprinkle well with breadcrumbs, and bake about half an hour. March 26th. Patties of lobster and almonds mixed. Charles Reade, The Cloister and the Hearth. Fill puff paste patty shells with a mixture compounded of 2 cupfuls of lobster, cut in small pieces, and half cupful of blanched and chopped almonds, stirred into 2 cupfuls of cream to which has been added the beaten yolks of 2 eggs and a glass of sherry. Let the cream, eggs, and wine cook together in a saucepan over boiling water until the cream begins to thicken. Season with a half teaspoonful of salt and a little paprika. Add the lobster and nuts. Boil, then fill the patty shells. Almond meal may be used to thicken the cream in place of the nuts. March 27th. My good old aunt, who never parted from me at the end of a holiday without stuffing a sweetmeat or some nice thing into my pocket, had dismissed me one evening with a smoking plum cake fresh from the oven. Charles Lamb, Essays of Aaliyah. A smoking plum cake, such as boys like, is no more than a soft gingerbread with raisins stirred in. Make as follows. Mix a batter of 1 cupful of butter, 1 cupful of New Orleans molasses, 1 cupful of sugar, 1 cupful of sour milk or buttermilk, 1 teaspoonful of soda dissolved in a little boiling water, a tablespoonful of ground ginger, a teaspoonful of cinnamon, 2 eggs, and about 5 cupfuls of flour. Reserve 1 cupful of flour to dredge 2 cupfuls of seeded raisins to be added at the last. Bake in a moderate oven, 30 to 40 minutes. March 28th. Gerard took out his pudding and found it delicious. Charles Reade, The Cloister and the Hearth. Gerard's brown bread pudding is made with half a pound of stale brown bread, grated, the same amount of currants and raisins, 4 eggs, half a pound of shredded suet, a gill of cream, a cup of sugar, a teaspoonful of nutmeg, and a small glassful of brandy. Boil in a floured cloth 1 hour. This is a very light and delicate pudding by reason of omitting the flour, usually considered necessary. March 29th. Art is very well, said Mr. Brandon. But with such pretty natural objects before you, I wonder you are not content to think of them. Do you mean the mashed potatoes, sir? Said Andrea, wondering. Thackeray, Diary of C. Jean de la Pluche, Esquire. Mash 6 large, freshly boiled potatoes with an open wire masher to keep them light and flaky. Season with a tablespoonful of butter, salt and pepper to taste. Stir in a cupful of cream. Beat into them 2 eggs. When well beaten, heap lightly in the dish in which they are to be served and set in the oven until a rich golden brown. March 30th. And you, gentlemen, what do you say to some elegant deviled kidneys for yourselves? Thackeray, The Tremendous Adventures of Major Gahagan. Scald a beef kidney, skin and slice it into thin slices. Put an ounce of butter into a frying pan. When hot, add the kidney, a tablespoonful of Worcestershire sauce, a saltspoonful of salt, a teaspoonful of dry mustard. Simmer 5 minutes. Add a gill of sour wine. Move the pan back and forth for a few moments over the fire, then serve. March 31st. He takes mutton chops for dinner and the best of arrowroot for supper. Charlotte Bronte, Shirley. When you would have arrowroot for supper, put into a saucepan half a pint of water, a glass of sherry or a tablespoonful of brandy, a little grated nutmeg, and a scant tablespoonful of sugar. Let it boil up once, then stir in a dessertspoonful of arrowroot, previously rubbed smooth, with 2 spoonfuls of cold water. Return to the fire, stir, and boil 3 minutes. April 1st. This bouillabaisse, a noble dish is, a sort of soup or broth or brew, or hotchpotch of all sorts of fishes that Greenwich never could outdo. Green herbs, red peppers, mussels, saffron, soles, onions, garlic, roach, and dace. All these you'll eat at Tara's Tavern, in that one dish of bouillabaisse. Thackeray, Poems. The famous bouillabaisse is indeed, as Thackeray describes it, a sort of fish chowder, but it seldom contains all the ingredients he mentions. It may be made with 4 pounds of fresh cod, 2 onions, a clove of garlic, 1 peppercorn, 2 stalks of celery, a quart of white potatoes cut in small pieces, salt, pepper, and a quarter of a pound of salt pork cut in slices. Put all the ingredients together in a granite kettle and stew slowly in water enough to cover them for 3 or 4 hours. Just before serving, add 1 quart of hot milk. April 2nd. Invite him to dinner, Emma, and help him to have the best of the fish and chickens. But leave him to choose his own wife. Jane Austen, Emma. Shad seems to the English visitor the best of American fish, and the truly national way of cooking it is to plank it, a much simpler operation than is commonly regarded. A shad plank may be bought now at any large house furnishing store. Split the fish as for broiling, wash and wipe dry, and tie with the inside upward on the plank. Salt and pepper thoroughly and dredge with flour. Either place the plank before a grate of clear coals, the orthodox way, or in a very hot oven. A thick shad will take fully half an hour to cook. When done, cut away the cords and butter the fish well, serving it on the plank. April 3rd. A little pipkin with a bit of mutton or veal in it, set on my table trouble-free, more than a feast contenteth me. Herrick, Poems. To prepare a knuckle of veal, cut all the meat from the bone, which should have been broken in several places. Put the bones in a pint of cold water and bring slowly to the boiling point. Remove the sinews from the meat which you have cut off. Put a tablespoonful of butter in the bottom of a kettle and let it melt. Dredge flour, salt, and pepper over the pieces of veal and put them in the kettle to brown, stirring them 4 or 5 minutes till they are delicately colored. Add a small carrot, 1 onion, and a bit of parsley. Pour over the browned veal the bones in the water in which they have been cooking, which should be boiling hot by this time. Cover closely and allow to simmer about 3 hours. When it is done, remove the veal and vegetables. Take out the bones. Thicken the gravy with a tablespoonful of flour. Taste and see if more seasoning is desirable. If you have mushrooms, 2 tablespoonfuls, cut in pieces, will be an addition. Pour over the veal and serve. April 4th. Give me a piece of marchpane. Shakespeare, Romeo and Juliet. Blanch a pound of Jordan almonds and pound them into mortar almost to a powder. Add to them 3/4 of a pound of confectioner's sugar and stir in a few drops of orange-flavored water. Beat all together until it becomes a good paste. Dust a little fine sugar on the rolling board and roll the paste, shaping it as you please. Ice by brushing with fine sugar wet with rose water or orange water, and bake in a moderate oven. April 5th. Very astonishing indeed, strange thing. Turning the dumplings round, rejoined the king. Walcott. Dumplings to serve with veal stew will be beautifully tender and light if the following directions are observed. Mix 1 pint of flour, 1/2 teaspoonful of salt, 2 teaspoonfuls of baking powder, and a teaspoonful of milk into a soft dough. Pull off bits of the dough and drop into the stew while it is boiling. Cover the stew pan tight and do not uncover for 10 minutes, when the dumplings should be done. Then, serve immediately. April 6th. Quite ready for the fowl and mashed potatoes, sir? Charles Dickens, The Haunted Man. The flavor of a baked potato is always superior to that of the boiled, friend of the Irishman. A touch of elegance is added by cutting off the tops of the potatoes after they are baked, scooping out the inside, beating it up with butter, salt, and cream until smooth and light, returning it to the shells and browning it in the oven. April 7th. A pâté of fruit conserved after a receipt devised by Gerard Moore's grandmère completed the dinner. Charlotte Brontë, Shirley. Chop a small teacupful each of apple, orange, candied lemon peel, and sultana raisins. Add a wineglass of sherry, 1/2 teaspoonful of powdered cloves, a tablespoonful of brandy, and a teacupful of sugar. Fill patty shells of thin puff paste and bake 1/2 hour in a moderate oven. April 8th. How sweet the butter our own hands have churned. Charles Reade, It is never too late to mend. The small modern churns that come for making butter while you wait solve all difficulties in the way of having the fresh, sweet butter so much liked by many people, but no one need be deterred from having it by the lack of a churn, as the largest size egg beaters and a kitchen bowl answer admirably. The cream needs to be heavy, and it comes more quickly if it is near but not at the souring point. Beat briskly past the whip butter cream stage, and the butter soon comes. No better butter can be made that has been produced with a bowl and a wooden paddle. April 9th. He heard the bacon sputter on the fork, and he heard his mother's step across the floor. Jean Angelo. Poems. He might as easily have heard the bacon sputter in the frying pan if his mother had placed there 6 slices when the pan was hot. To make fried bacon delicious, remove when beginning to curl up at the edges to a hot dish, and fry 1/2 pound of mushrooms, steamed, washed, and peeled in the bacon fat left in the pan. Pour them over slices of toast, arrange over them the bacon, and serve hot. April 10th. To feed on caviar and eat anchovies. Randolph, Muse's Looking Glass. Spread on delicate slices of toast anchovies from which the heads and backbones have been taken. The best are those packed in bay leaves and spices. Lightly scramble 5 eggs, in which are stirred 1 large tablespoonful of butter, 4 of cream, salt and pepper. When the eggs begin to thicken, turn on to the toast. A cupful of tomatoes cut in bits is an addition much liked by many, or stewed tomatoes may be used if more convenient. April 11th. The sweets shook and trembled till it was quite impossible to help them. Charles Dickens. Sketches by Boz. For a pleasant and wholesome dessert, orange charlotte is well adapted. Soak 1/3 of a box of gelatin in 1/3 of a cup of cold water. When dissolved, pour on 1/3 of a cup of boiling water, the juice of a large lemon, and 1 cup of sugar. Strain and add a cup of orange juice and pulp and a little of the grated rind. Cool in a pan of ice water. When cold, add a cup of cream whipped stiff. Line a mold with ladyfingers or stale cake and pour in the orange mixture. April 12th. A barn door fowl, which does not awe you with its claws and beak, but which in cackling sets you thinking of your eggs tomorrow at breakfast in the pause of finer meditation. Mrs. Browning, Aurora Leigh. Eggs fried in sweet oil make a pleasant variety and are more delicate than the usual fried egg. Put about 2 tablespoonfuls of olive oil in a hot spider. When the oil is hot, break in 1 egg, then another. By the time the second egg is in the pan, the first will be ready to fold over. By the time the second is folded, the first is ready to take out. Repeat until enough eggs are cooked. April 13th. This dish of meat is too good for any but anglers or very honest men. Isaac Walton, Complete Angler. Kebabbed mutton is a dish that would answer to the gentle angler's description. Remove all the fat from a loin of mutton and cut it into chops or steaks. Dip these into the yolks of 3 eggs and sprinkle over them breadcrumbs seasoned with salt and pepper and summer savory. Place them together as before they were cut and tie them in shape. Roast them in a quick oven half an hour, basting with butter and the juices of the meat. Make a gravy by adding to the liquid remaining in the pan after the meat is cooked a tablespoonful of flour and a teacupful of tomato catsup. April 14th. You'd find sandwiches and sherry in plenty if you were to search his carriage. Trollope. Phineas Finn. A delicious sandwich to eat with wine is made of Jordan almonds pounded in a mortar, sprinkled with sugar, moistened with rich cream, and spread on thin slices of Boston brown bread. April 15th. These procure quiet sleep: violets, lettuce, especially boiled, syrup of dried roses, saffron, balm, apples, at our going to bed. Bacon. Pick apart a head of lettuce, wash carefully, and put into a steamer over a kettle of boiling water. A steamer may be improvised by using an ordinary colander and a pot of boiling water. Cover closely, laying a thick, folded cloth upon the lid. Boil hard for half an hour, then drain and lay the lettuce leaves upon a hot dish, salt and pepper, and if this dish is not eaten at bedtime to secure quiet sleep, it will be much improved by pouring over it a sauce piquante. April 16th. You can make whipped cream. Pray, what relief will that be to a sailor who wants beef? W. King. While whipped cream may be well considered too light and airy to satisfy a brawny sailor, it is quite substantial enough to follow the beef. Poured over marrons glacés, flavored with sherry or Madeira, and capped with a candied cherry, it will please both eye and palate. April 17th. Mrs. Jameson was kindly indulgent to Miss Barker's want of knowledge of the customs of high life, and to spare her feelings, eat 3 large pieces of seed cake. Mrs. Gaskell, Cranford. The economies of Cranford make it probable that Miss Barker's seed cakes were concocted by a rule not unlike the following, which calls for cheap materials and produces a result likely to please a Jameson palate. Mix a quart of flour with half a pound of sugar and 1/4 ounce of allspice. Melt 3/4 pound of butter with half a pint of warm milk. Add while warm 1/4 yeast cake and work up to a smooth dough, mixing into it a cupful of cleaned currants and half a cupful of caraway seeds. Bake an hour and a half. April 18th. Tongue. Well, that's a very good thing when it ain't a woman's. Bread, knuckle of ham, regular picter, cold beef in slices, very good. Charles Dickens, Pickwick Papers. Boil corned tongue 4 hours after soaking it overnight. Serve it hot with spinach cooked as follows. Clean the spinach thoroughly, rinsing in several waters. Boil rapidly for half an hour. No water need to be put on the pot. Drain and chop coarsely. Season with pepper, salt, and butter. April 19th. Our country member, growing hot at cheese and salad time, about the spread of democracy in England, burst out as follows. Wilkie Collins, The Moonstone. The following combination of cheese and salad is good. To a cupful of cold chicken or veal, add 1.5 cups of grated cheese. Make a dressing of the yolks of 3 hard-boiled eggs rubbed smooth. Stir in 2 tablespoons of salad oil, a teaspoonful of dry English mustard, or 2 of the German prepared mustard, a good sprinkling of paprika, half a teaspoonful of salt, and 2 tablespoonfuls of vinegar or 3 of lemon juice. Mix with the cheese and chicken and garnish with the whites of the eggs. April 20th. The cooks are hard at work, sir, chopping herbs and mincing meats and breaking marrow bones. Cyber. Love makes a man. The herb which we most use with meat, as well as drink, is the fragrant mint, and the sauce of that name is made by adding to 4 tablespoons of vinegar 3 each of chopped mint and granulated sugar crushed together, and a dash of white pepper. Serve cold. April 21st. She was good enough to give me some the other day, with soup au choux. Annie I. Thackeray, The Village on the Cliff. For cabbage soup of a delicate flavor, pull apart and wash the cabbage leaves. Let them lie an hour or more in cold water. Then put in a saucepan with enough boiling water to cover and a tablespoonful of salt. Cook for 40 minutes or until tender. Drain off the water and chop fine. Put in a saucepan of 3 tablespoonfuls of butter, 2 of flour, a stalk of celery, a bay leaf, and a quart of white stock, or in its absence, a quart of milk. Cook slowly for 10 minutes, then remove the bay leaf and celery, stirring till smooth. Then add the cabbage, season with salt and pepper. Cook 10 minutes, stirring constantly. If it is desired to have a smooth soup, put through a sieve. Otherwise, add half a pint of cream and serve. April 22nd. There stay the haste, and with the savory fish, indulge thy taste. Gay. Red snapper, firm of flesh, plump, and handsome, is a fish that deserves to be better known than it is. It is more delicious boiled than baked, as is also the case with shad, so rarely seen boiled, with its delicate flesh unimpaired in texture and flavor. There should be enough boiling water in the kettle to cover the fish. To a gallon of water, add the juice of 3 lemons, half a teacupful of salt, and 1 of vinegar. After the fish is in the water, bring quickly to a boil, then push the kettle back where the water will simmer gently. Cook from half to 3/4 of an hour. April 23rd. The baddish boy chuckled and addressed himself to the nice brown steaks with their rich gravy. Charles Reed, Christy Johnson. There are steaks and steaks. Nearly every untrained applicant for a cook's situation declares that she can broil a steak and heat up canned tomatoes, but her steaks are not, as a rule, of the following type: a cut from the first, second, or third rib of a roasting piece of beef, the bone removed, the steak rubbed with olive oil, dusted with pepper, salt, and flour, and broiled over a charcoal fire. Held near the hot coals for the first 2 minutes, then lifted up from them to complete the cooking more slowly. For a rich gravy to accompany it, mince fine 2 shallots. Boil 10 minutes in 2 gills of claret. Add half a pint of strong brown stock and a pinch of cayenne pepper. Pour over the steak. April 24th. It was a very light, wholesome cake. Brown made it on purpose for the children. Thackeray, The Newcomes. Boil together half a pint of water and 2/3 of a cup of butter. While boiling, add 2 cups of flour, even full. When cool, add 5 eggs, well beaten. Drop on a pan. Bake in a quick oven 20 minutes. Put together with a layer of cream, or split and fill with cream. Rule for cream. Boil 1 pint of milk. When boiling, add 2 eggs, 1 cup of sugar, and half a cup of flour beaten together. Boil 2 or 3 minutes. Remove from the fire. Stir in a small piece of butter and a tablespoonful of vanilla flavoring. April 25th. Stay, John. Did you perceive anything in my chocolate cup this morn? Sheridan, St. Patrick's Day. Chocolate for immediate use should be made by dissolving in water 1½ ounces of sweet chocolate for each cup, stirring from time to time. It should be allowed to boil 15 minutes to make it smooth and consistent. Serve with cream, whipped or plain. Rolat Savarin quotes on good authority as saying that chocolate in perfection is made overnight for breakfast, allowing it to remain on the side of the range and reheating when ready to serve. April 26th. Custards for supper, and an endless host of syllabubs and jellies and mince pies, and other such ladylike luxuries. Shelley. Dissolve half a box of gelatin in half a pint of wine. Add 1 cupful of sugar, 2 beaten eggs, and 1 pint of cream, heated to the boiling point. When cool, stir in another pint of cream whipped stiff and flavored with grated orange peel. Pour into a jelly mold and place near the ice to set. April 27th. For meadow buds, I get a whiff of Cheshire cheese or only sniff the turtle maid at Cuffs. Hood. There are many ways of using the well-known Cheshire cheese, but a very good way is to pound 4 ounces of it with 1.5 ounces of butter and half teaspoonful of white powdered sugar, a little bit of mace, and a wineglass of white wine. Press down into a jar. April 28th. Sweet turnips, when they are young and tender, may be pared and cut crosswise in 1/4-inch slices. Lay in ice-cold water for half an hour. Cook till tender in boiling unsalted water. Drain and dry on a cloth, and before they are quite cold, sprinkle with pepper and salt, cover with flour, and fry. April 29th. Deviled chicken and buttered toast. Disraeli, Coningsby. Cut cold chicken in inch squares as nearly as possible. Cover with olive oil and lemon juice, and stand them in a cold place for 2 or 3 hours. Then season with pepper, salt, and a little dry mustard. Dip in egg and cracker crumbs, and set aside till stiff. Then fry a light brown. Have ready a cupful of good white sauce. Allow it to boil up. Then beat through it a tablespoonful of cream and an egg. Half fill ramekins with the chicken and pour into each some of the sauce. April 30th. Miss Bates, let Emma help you to a little bit of tart. A very little bit. You need not be afraid of unwholesome preserves here. Jane Austen, Emma. Take the yolks of 2 eggs, the juice of 2 lemons, 1 cup of sugar, 2 even tablespoonfuls of flour, and 1/2 cupful of water. Bake with a bottom crust only, and when done, cover with meringue made of the whites of the eggs, beaten up with 2 tablespoonfuls of sugar and a little lemon juice. Return to the oven until the meringue is a very light brown. Sweet dreams.